Okay, hi everyone, I'm Jasmine and I'm the Events and Communications Administrator at One Nucleus. So welcome to this afternoon's Innovation Workshop, which is hosted by CY Partners. Now this session is on the topic of solving scientific gaps, stories behind the attraction and retention. So just before we get going, a couple of logistics. As you may have noticed, we are recording this session. And recordings will be made available via the app, hopefully next week. Throughout the session, if you don't mind keeping your microphone on mute, unless you've been invited to ask a question, that would be much appreciated. And finally, we do like these sessions to be as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the chat box. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand you over to Neil Walton. Over to you.
Thanks, Jazz. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our workshop, Solving Scientific Talent Gaps. We're going to be sharing some stories behind the attraction of scientists and the retention of scientists that we see. Just a little bit about us. We are a boutique scientific recruitment company. We've been working for about 13 years. Just to give you some context, we typically work from, I suppose, entry-level graduate scientific positions up to maybe managerial roles, and the focus of our talk today is really around the scientific elements, very much the bench scientist type of person. I've been working in scientific recruitment for about 15 years myself. Before that I was a scientist. I worked in the labs for about 7 years, and I will hand you over to my colleague Lisa now.
Hi, hello everyone. Yes, my name's Lisa Chatterjee, and I am the writer in residence for CY Partners, and I've been here about 6 months now. But before that, I worked for 10 years in QA and quality management for a pharmaceutical organisation. So since joining, I've been interviewing and capturing the stories from the job seeker's perspective, and we're going to share some of those today. Thank you.
Okay. As I'm talking through this, I'd like you all to think of yourselves in terms of both being an employee and potentially an employer as well. I think it's good to kind of see it from both sides. And also as well, this is very much kind of sharing some of the stories and trends that we're seeing. We have got some data in this, and we have also got some case studies which we'd like to share with you. But very much this is kind of our thoughts and opinions. Okay, so in terms of recruitment trends, we're going to cover that now. We're going to look really specifically over the last couple of years, but actually kind of going back a little bit before that. We're going to look at recruitment processes, how well you attract skilled scientific professionals, and certainly in what is a very competitive market at the moment. Again, process of attraction, and we're going to be looking at a case study. We're going to be looking specifically at drug discovery as a case study, so the synthetic organic chemist, medicinal chemist type of positions, and we're going to be looking at talent retention as well. So before we get started, I would like you to answer a question. That question is something we put to a number of scientists we surveyed. Easily. So the question we asked was a number of scientists who'd moved from academia to industry, and we asked them what one key skill did they think was most valued by their new employer. So that's people moving from academia to industry. What is in their mind the key skill that their new employer most values? So if you could pop something in the chat, and we'll be able to share with you the results of that survey that we took. If anyone's there, communication. Well, as a bit of a spoiler, okay. I'll wait a few more moments then if there's anything else coming through. Okay, so the one skill we got back from our survey actually was a growth mindset, which we thought was quite interesting. So rather than it being any one particular technical skill or any one I suppose, scientific talent, you might say. It was actually a growth mindset. So it's coming from academia into industry. There's obviously a greater need for people to have a growth mindset. One thing that we found from candidates when we were surveying them is they were very much aware of a need for a continuous learning within industry. The other thing that candidates became very aware of, and this is certainly something you may have seen and certainly very relevant for the last couple of years, is a bigger focus on emotional intelligence and EQ, and very much a focus on a company's well-being. Okay. So much so, even in advertising, we're seeing companies are being more specific around the kind of wellbeing programs that they present to staff, providing support, and that's very much evident right at the early stages. And certainly we've obviously seen a bigger focus on that post-pandemic. In terms of something that candidates are looking for, and this would seem reasonably obvious, but it's flexibility. It's often the offering of the hybrid working solution where candidates are based at home and in the office. This is even something we're seeing in roles that are traditionally 100% lab-based, or would be considered 100% lab-based, where people are hoping that they can do the write-ups and they can maybe do a day from home, which has obviously helped people with the greater work-life balance, but also allowed laboratories to, if you will, kind of vary the numbers of people they have in the lab at any one time, and reduce the, I guess, the concentration of people. Salaries are something that we've seen as being very interesting as well. I don't know if you're aware, but there was a survey that New Scientist did in collaboration with a company called SRG, and they surveyed a number of scientists across the industry, and they reported that they have seen an 11% increase in their earnings across 2021, which would seem massive and obviously way in excess of inflation or anything like that. I think we did see a little bit of a drop last year, but certainly when you take that into account, 11% is still a large increase in earnings. Worth bearing in mind when you think about how you're doing your incremental staff pay rises once a year, I would imagine. In terms of what we're considering the great reshuffle, you may have seen in media as being termed the great resignation, with maybe 60% of people thinking about leaving and moving jobs at the moment. What we prefer to call it is the great reshuffle. In the last quarter, and that's, I think it's August to October, the National Office of Statistics said that they'd seen 1.17 million vacancies in the UK, which is a record high. It's never been that high before. So whilst lots of people are thinking about moving for work, there is a significant amount of vacancies for them to choose from, which is why having a robust and effective recruitment process is really important. One thing we've seen, and this is a trend from companies, it's how skilled you need a candidate to be when you're looking to hire them. When I started in recruitment, it was often that a company would look for someone who had potential for development. They would look at softer skills, and there has now been a trend towards someone who is maybe 90% of the job, maybe 90% of all the required skills there, and are looking maybe for a sideways move, which obviously makes for some certain considerations when you do recruit in that kind of model, in terms of what are you offering the candidate to take almost a sideways move, and secondly, when that candidate has developed that final 10% and are able to work effectively in their role, where are they going to get their development from? Okay, I think that's back over to Lisa.
It is. Thank you. Thanks, Neil. So I just wanted to ask a few questions around how you attract your skilled employees. So the first question is, do you have a public persona? So have you got visibility of your organisation's brand and culture? And do you have people actively engaging with outside of the business, not just when you're recruiting as well? So a lot of this is online, and LinkedIn has seen a huge increase in usage, accelerated by the pandemic. And from that platform, people are more likely to follow than connect, especially in the initial stages of their job search. So it's like their data gathering stage. So what are you putting out there, and are you creating content that's visible for them to see? And then the second question, and then more on that is, like, we work with universities, we attend their careers fairs, and everyone who is in anticipation for graduating has a LinkedIn profile now. It's not something that we need to recommend anymore. They already have it, and they're getting established for when they're graduating. So yeah, it's been present on that. And then I did a survey, and you can understand the reasons for following rather than connecting initially, because there is a protective aspect to that anonymity, and they're just wanting to kind of get a feel for your company before approaching you. And we did a survey about a job seekers toolkit and what they're using. So we surveyed LinkedIn active, recruiter connected science professionals, and this is how they got their job if they started a new position in the last 2 years. And 25% obtained their job through a job board, and 25% through a direct vacant website application, 40% through LinkedIn. So you can see that it is a multifaceted toolkit that job seekers are using. And so as employers recruiting in that landscape, we need to have not all our eggs in one basket, and it is multifaceted as well. And then if I go back to my questions, I would like you to ask, just have a think, how are you wording your job descriptions? And therefore, how are you wording your adverts? And is that potentially excluding anyone? So Neil recently had a job description that had the word strong 3 times. So like strong in pipetting techniques could be competent in pipetting techniques, couldn't it? And if you're interested in the gender differences of how confident we need to feel as job seekers to even apply for jobs, then Indeed have recently published a report recently into diversity, inclusion and belonging, and it's really interesting reading. So some of the highlights that I've got from that is women over 50 is the fastest growing sector of the workforce. And this is not restricted to life sciences, this is across the UK as a whole, which, just as an aside, made me think of the McKinsey report that was published in April 2021, and that implied that females in the age bracket of 25 to 40, up to 25% were considering scaling back their careers as a direct consequence of the pandemic. So it's, I mean, this is data that's over 6 months old, so it's just trying to be aware of the landscape and how we word things, and to make it accessible to all. Going back to the Indeed diversity, inclusion and belonging report, they had some interesting stats on the unfairness experienced in the workplace by the job seeking process by ethnic minorities. and I'm actually going to quote direct from their report. So job seekers named Hamza and Soraya must send out up to 60% more CVs than a Steve or a Lucy to get the same number of interviews. And again, it's across all industry sectors. And I think within science, we're very good at focusing on skills and competencies. But it is something to be aware of, to be as inclusive as possible. And I'm sure you're all aware as well that the UK changed their visa guidelines this summer. So international students can now work for 3 years post-PhD, and undergrad students can now work for 2 years post-undergrad degree without the need for company sponsorship. And from this report, you can see there's a clear established link between diversity and company success. So if you get in touch with me at the end, if you'd like a copy, I can pass you over a copy. But the final question I wanted to ask everyone about attracting skilled employees is, what are we offering, and what learning and development opportunities do you have in place, and how visible is this at application stage as well as at interview stage? And if you consider the 4 main motivators categories, so time wealth, which is freedom and flexibility, financial wealth, which is money, so salary and benefits, social wealth, which is our communities, and health wealth, which is our physical and mental well-being. And we will come on to this, especially when we talk to about retention later in the presentation as well. So I'm going to hand you back to Neil now, who's going to talk about the process in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Lisa. So we did a survey of science professionals who had gained a new role in the last 12 months, and we asked them whether they preferred virtual or face-to-face interviews. So I was wondering if you would be so good as to drop into the chat what you think was the most popular option out of those two, so a virtual video interview or a face-to-face on-site interview. We'll give you a few moments to do that. Any others? Okay, so what's that? That's one for each. So interesting. That absolutely mirrors our findings. We saw that people were absolutely split 50-50 between a face-to-face visit and a virtual interview. Things they noted as being the reason they preferred either one of those two options with regards to video, it was the fact there was no travel to the site. They could do it from their home. There was a lower sort of anxiety or nervousness attached to interviewing in their own space. They could have it prepared and set up as they wanted, and also they were able to have better notes kept. They could have things open in front of them which the interviewer wouldn't be aware of as well, which is always something to be mindful of when you are interviewing someone, that they could well have quite a lot of supporting information there. Things they said with regards to face-to-face visits, some would seem obvious. They get to see the site, see the facility, meet the team. One person said they got to sample the coffee, which I thought was interesting. And broadly speaking, have a better and deeper communication with the people that they will potentially be working for. One thing I will say as a caveat to that, most people when asked said that they would want to visit the site at some point in the process. There was very few people that said they would be happy with an entirely virtual interview process. Okay, timelines. We're seeing as the market is incredibly competitive at the moment. I think companies that are moving quickly are doing the best to secure their niche talent. I think decisions are best made when you know what you're going to have to be deciding on, having parameters established before the interviews and making those decisions quickly, and then giving people the best notice of the interviews. We're finding that a lot of candidates are saying they need as much time to attend a video interview as they do a face-to-face interview. I think it's easy when like myself, you work at a desk and you can interview kind of any time in your day. When you're in the lab, a video interview is as challenging as a site visit rather, and they have to often take time off. So as much notice for that as possible. The biggest thing, or the two biggest things we found that candidates had issue with regards to their job seeking was salary transparency in the application process and lack of feedback. Salary transparency is certainly a contentious issue. We see a lot of employers are nervous about putting salary brackets online, certainly for fear of current employees seeing them and going to their manager and wondering why they're not on the same amount of money being advertised. However, it's worth bearing in mind, a lot of people wouldn't go and view a house unless they knew how much it was being sold for. A lot of candidates won't apply for a job unless there is salary attached to that. In fact, it's twice as many. So you're half as likely to get an application as you would if you do display a salary. And giving good feedback. And I think, Lisa, you wanted to add something on this.
Yes. So giving good feedback is really important and should actually be viewed as the closing process, as closing the loop, and an essential step in your recruitment process. So as a life science company, you probably have a quality management system in place. And although recruitment doesn't sit within a QMS, continuous improvement processes are an established process within that system, and it's not too much of a stretch to kind of move that into your recruitment processes as well. So it's kind of providing good constructive feedback, and it will definitely benefit the job seekers immediately now, but it will actually be a benefit for your organisation in the future as well. Especially if it is a skills short candidate driven market, then you kind of want the people to get the feedback to be able to improve if they haven't got the job. So again, just take what you need from this. It's one of those aspects where if you're working with a recruiter or if you have other opportunities that they can apply for, giving the bad news isn't quite as hard, but it is very useful to the job seeker. So I'm going to signpost some other data here. So a LinkedIn Changemaker, Andy McCaskill, has a great initiative. He's again, not life science specific, but he's got an initiative to encourage giving 3 good and 3 needs improvement pieces of feedback from the companies that his candidates are getting interviewed with. And he also conducted the next piece of research that prompted we can all recruit better, we can improve this process. So they ranked their shortlists of 5 as to perceived order of need, or how keen they were, how much they wanted the job, how much they needed the job, against the outcome of the interview. And really surprisingly, it wasn't the 20% of like 5 that you would expect that got the job, but it was actually between 5 and 10% of the time that the person who was the most keen and the most in need got the job. And 50% of the time, it was the person, and in his words, who wasn't really interested, who had to be persuaded to go for the interview, who got the job. And I'm paraphrasing his content here, so please get in touch at the end and I can signpost you to the original content. It was really fascinating though, and to do the reasons to do with this is to do with our honesty in an interview and how authentic we come across when we remove the filter that we apply of saying what we think the other person wants to hear. So if we remove that, then we can actually come across more honest and more authentic. And also perhaps how we listen and how we answer questions when we're in that environment, and we've assigned more we've given it more importance and significance than others. And also how we react as interviewers to hearing somebody's needs, or to hearing if something's gone wrong in somebody's life, such as redundancy, or if like bad things have happened. And it's to bear this in mind that we need to kind of look past as interviewers, we need to look past our own judgments in that sense as well, because there's a lot of kind of big feelings like embarrassment or shame associated when things go wrong. But yeah, so giving constructive feedback is important. Our resilience as job seekers gets worn really thin as the process continues. And actually, as humans, we take rejection as redirection. So in a very skill-short, candidate-driven market, giving the constructive feedback that actually empowers people to keep going and be resilient is like what we would want to keep the marketplace, to keep those skills. So something to, yeah, I'm just going to move on to, you perhaps all know this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a useful aspect of human behaviour to be aware of. He was a psychologist from the 1940s, and he produced this pyramid. And at the bottom of the foundation, we've got our physiological needs. So we've got our shelter, food, warmth, and then we kind of build upon that our employment, our safety needs. And then we move into our sense of connection through loving and belonging. And then finally, our esteem and our status and respect. And finally, self-actualization. So if you're interviewing, it's being aware of how where you sit in this pyramid, but also where the interviewee sits in this pyramid, because it is very hard to focus on the higher aspects of this human behaviour when you are struggling to pay your rent every month, or you're struggling to gain employment. And like working in recruitment, Neil will know, it's much easier to get a job when you're in a job than it is when you're not. So because of where you're focusing. So yes, please, we should bear this in mind. And I'm going to pass you back to Neil now to talk about actual skills gaps. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks a lot for that. So we looked at this broadly in two categories, I suppose, one of which we called kind of new sciences, where it's a new and developing technology, which is developing faster than I suppose the training and experience can catch up. And secondly, kind of more established sciences. And the established science that we looked at essentially is the drug discovery, medicinal chemistry that I talked about earlier. In terms of new sciences and specifically, it was interesting, somebody mentioned kind of AI and data. That's exactly one of the growth areas we're seeing, sort of big data, digital health, and certainly in silico modeling and things like this. This very much where the technology develops, and there just isn't the experience and talent in the market. Things we were thinking about with regards to kind of, I suppose, getting people earlier in their career pathways, being out, making the technology more available to people, talking about it, getting media behind it. In terms of companies, we looked at sort of workshops and seminars, opening up technologies to cross-train, to allow teams to see skills in actions, which also includes reskilling current employees that can be outsourced to in-house training. And what we will see here is outsourcing and partnering with agencies as being a very viable option there. Agencies spend a lot of time proactively networking within new technologies, spend time predicting where those skills gaps will be, and ideally working towards those proactively. And then collaboration with academia, which is something that we're kind of going to be talking about a little bit more in the established sciences. It's worth noting Forbes in America is seeing a trend towards working and studying at the same time, rather than the kind of traditional model rather of studying and then working. And we're seeing a little bit of a similar thing in the UK with degree level apprenticeships as well. Okay, so as I said, the case study we were looking at was medicinal chemistry and drug discovery. Now, traditionally, a lot of the drug discovery was undertaken by big pharma, and there's been a lot of change in that marketplace in the UK. Certainly, we've seen a lot of redundancies over the years, and a movement to more an outsourced model in a kind of CRO, CDMO setup, or smaller drug discovery units. I think the redundancies masked a lot of the skills gap in previous years, where you generally had one big pharma releasing people into the market. GSK, Novartis, Eli Lilly could all be considered in that bracket, which has masked that gap, and currently nobody's doing it. So there is a big demand actually from both big pharma and CRO for these kind of skill sets. So we spoke to 3 professionals working in the industry at the moment for their thoughts and views, and what they thought were ways that the market can help to bridge the skills gap. The first person we spoke to was Dr. Judy Haler. Judy spent most of her career working in big pharma, and has been working at UCL at the Translational Research Office for a few years. She set up a pilot training program, which was specifically set up to upskill postdoctoral chemists for industry-based roles. Having worked in big pharma, she saw that a lot of people were coming out of academia, and it was a real learning curve for them to get up to speed with regards to the requirements of commercial drug discovery. The program
I think you may have accidentally muted yourself, Neil. Sorry.
There we go. Apologies, not quite sure how I managed that. But the program was set up with a real focus on collaboration. Lots of big pharma companies got involved in collaboration, people involved with GSK, Eli Lilly, LifeArc, and it essentially set people up in academia for working in both a big pharma or an SME type of environment. Unfortunately, the program, as a lot of things in academia, was an ongoing funding requirement, and it was closed down. But it was interesting because I don't know if any of you were on the One Nucleus seminar workshop earlier this year, which talked about whose responsibility it was for training the scientists of the future. But it did seem like it was a bit of an ongoing conversation. There we go. Okay, the second person we spoke to was head of chemistry at LifeArc, Dr. Andy Merritt. LifeArc is a translational research organisation. You see they've got 80 or 90 scientists in Stevenage, with 20 up in Scotland. An interesting statistic from them is that 10% of the scientists within those numbers there are actually on a year-long internship, which is quite a high proportion across the company. That works really well for them, and it allows them to, I suppose, pre-skill some of the people they will then later on hire into permanent roles. There's a number or several candidates, I think it was 5 working for them currently, that have come through that program and have then gone on to take a permanent role. There is data to support that people who come in through a placement year once they start their permanent role, are then at a faster development pace than those who come in straight from academia, which is good. And what that's also done, as well as giving the business the opportunity of growing the talent pool, as well as the individuals on those placements, is the opportunity for longer serving staff to be able to upskill in terms of their leadership. So each of these internships is being supervised or mentored or managed by an individual in the business, and they are getting a chance to develop themselves and develop their leadership. So it's development across all levels, really. And the third person we spoke to was Dr. Ben Bellini, ICR. He works within the cancer therapeutics unit. There's 150 people in that unit, 35 of which are on postdoctoral training programs, which are typically 2-year programs, which then get extended out into 4 years. And they are, I suppose they would describe themselves as a bit of a halfway between academia and industry in the way that they operate. They operate a very collaborative and multidisciplinary team set up across their drug discovery. And what they expect people to do is, after coming out of those fellowships, is to have the skills that are going to set them up for a industry-based position, as well as delivering some very innovative drug discovery. So it's a bit of a win-win for them there. So just broadly speaking on those 3 solutions then, so it's collaboration with academia to upskill, providing internships, and using fellowships. We've seen some great benefit into the marketplace of drug discovery. Thanks, Lisa.
And then the next part of our workshop is moving on to retention. And so we tried to do a survey where you could ask 100 people what their main motivator was to stay in their current role. And in fact, we did. And we got 100 different answers. So when you separate into the 4 wealths that I mentioned earlier, so we've got time wealth, so freedom and flexibility, financial, so salary and benefits, social, so your community, and health, so physical and mental well-being that I mentioned earlier. But it's such a nuanced and complex system, isn't it? Process, feelings. And one example is, so one respondent chose time wealth, and because he had a 4-day on, 6-day off, 12-hour shift pattern. So he had 6 days to himself. Whereas for me, so I've got like childcare, and so time wealth for me, that flexibility would be making the school run occasionally. So it's so particular and individualistic. And so whilst we're still working on this, you probably recognise the image on the screen, and it's it originally stemmed from Japanese culture, following your ikigai, which is loosely translated as pathway to fulfillment, your reason for being, sorry. And we kind of use it to for people reaching their lifelong career goals, career fulfillment goals. So it's a journey, it's a pathway. And as life science organisations, you already are really ticking the mission and vocation box of what the world needs. And by virtue of your objectives being worthy goals for people to be involved in. And we know from the salary survey that Neil mentioned at the beginning that we can get paid for this. It's so for profession and vocation. So next we need to focus on how to make us good at it and to love it. And then people will be very, they're very happy, won't they? We're fulfilling our potential. And so finally, I saw an infographic on social media that went along the lines of an employee stays in a company if they're paid well, mentored, challenged, promoted, involved, appreciated, valued, empowered, and most of all trusted. And I would just, yeah, if I just leave it on that. I mean, some of these are yes, no questions, answers. How are we doing when we sit with these feelings? And some of them are on a spectrum. So if we take challenged, for instance, you want to challenge your staff and your team just enough so that they're outside of their comfort zone where the magic happens, but not so much that they are feeling anxious and have imposter syndrome. So yes, going back to the beginning, the very beginning, when we asked scientists moving from academia to industry what they felt was the most appreciated skill that they brought, it was a growth mindset and appreciation of continuous learning. So isn't that empowering to know that we can bridge our skills gaps with these? And I'm going to hand back to Neil to summarize. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So I think broadly speaking, the kind of things we've covered on attraction and retention, making your company attractive to scientific professionals, and this is kind of during and before and after the application processes, making it attractive to all in terms of inclusivity, and we've also sort of shared some ideas that people in the industry are sharing with us with regards to scientific talent gaps. So I think that's everything that we had. If you have any questions, you want to ask anything, please drop it in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, for such an interesting presentation. And thank you to those that have attended today. This is a really good opportunity for you to ask any questions via the chat box, or feel free to unmute. That's absolutely fine. I guess I'll kick it off because I've got a question. So you mentioned about how employees will phrase their job descriptions and things like that, and the importance of the type of language that you use. But are there any kind of other common key errors that you see employers making quite frequently that you would say either recommend not to do that? Do you have any kind of key things that you would either add or change about a job description that you see?
Yeah, so perhaps Neil, would this be a good question for you to answer as you see and recruit with?
Yeah, I think we used the example of the word strong, which is not to generalize, but there are better words to use that are more inclusive, I think, and that really for us is a key thing. And what we would always urge employers to do is to have a really good look at the way you're producing your adverts and things like this. In terms of mistakes to be made, I think it's difficult to pick up specific examples, but I think just wording them inclusively is a really big positive. That's probably a really, really important thing. I think, Lisa, you might have had some. I think did you look at some studies over this?
Yeah, I did, over different genders and how we respond or how confident we feel, and it possibly quite outdated data, but it was along the lines of females feeling that they need to tick more of the essential criteria, like they have to have the experience more than males. So we would maybe want to have 90% of the essential criteria in a job description or a job advert, and less likely to wing it. But it is a very fast changing marketplace as well, especially after a big change event like the pandemic, because it has accelerated some changes like significantly, and on the back of this we can change human behavior quite easily. Like our habits are formed it's very hard to change them, as we'll all know, because New Year's coming up, isn't it? It's very hard to change them when there isn't a big major event that's actually changing our habits for us. So, and giving us a bit of a shake up. So some of the data that we've used, I've actually popped a little feedback survey into the chat. If you would like to have the original published data, I'm happy to kind of share that. The data that we've used ourselves is not published, but I'm happy to talk people through it. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Lisa and Neil, that's great. And if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to unmute, or you can also use the raise hand function that we worked out a couple of days ago. Yeah, feel free to ask those now. Well, of course, I mean, Neil and Lisa are both on the conference app, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact them and get in touch that way. We'll give it a few more moments to see if anyone else has any questions.
I would also add as well, I will be at the in-person event tomorrow. So if anybody sees me around and wants to have a conversation, possibly privately, about anything we've discussed today, more than happy to do that. If you can grab me tomorrow. And other than that, I look forward to seeing any and all of you there.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lisa and Neil, for that presentation. It was brilliant and really insightful. And thank you to everybody that attended. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and hope to see some of you either in person tomorrow or online at some of our other sessions. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.